Well, the passing of an icon, David Ellis, Colin Jillings, a man you knew well, a man who everybody in New Zealand racing revered.
Yeah, he was just an absolute champion person and a legend of the turf. I've never met a man that was such great company, that was such a great judge of horses. And every December I used to take him to my stable and I used to show him 10 or 15 of the best horses. And I'm saying, this is what we're thinking of doing with that horse. This is what we're thinking of doing with that horse. He'd say, you're wasting your time with that horse. You're on track with that horse. And he was just an incredible judge of knowing what to do. And he was right 99 times out of 100.
David, do you believe that was experience or having had so many good horses, or is that an inherent thing which some people just have?
He was just born with it. Rode his first winner when he was 12 years of age at Ellerslie. He loved talking about it. Won the railway when he was at Ellerslie when he was still a teenager. He was an unbelievable horseman, and I'd never forget a funny story at Ellerslie one day. He said to me, you know, pal, he said, in the last race, he said, you know, I think I'm a real good thing in this. And I said, well, on the tote it's paying $1.50, but fixed odds, it's paying $4.80. $4.80? This thing can't get beaten. So for a guy that was on Steve Davis's show telling everybody that his biggest bet was $5 each way on a horse, I couldn't believe to tell you how much he asked me to put on this horse for him. So at the turn, I'm watching this race with him. I said, you're going to win this, Jello, but not with the one we want. The stablemate's going to win it. No, it won't beat this thing. And anyway, the stablemate got up on the outside and beat the horse that we backed. And I've never seen a trainer Quinella a race and be so filthy on the world.
Why do you think he was a great trainer, apart from the horsemanship? He seemed a man who was very good at planning long-range targets.
Well, firstly, he loved horses, absolutely loved them. And he liked doing everything properly. So he spent a lot of time planning a horse, and he would tell you 6 months out, and I'll never forget, he had a horse called Diamond Lover, and she was in the railway handicap, which in those days was on Boxing Day or New Year's Day. And I said, you're not going to start that in the race. It hasn't started for 6 months. Anyway, I realised what his plan was. He took her to the races each Saturday for the previous month and just walked her around for an hour so that she tightened up a little bit. Then he'd give her an exhibition gallop. Come race day, he had a bang on, and she absolutely bolted in, and that was a huge result for Patrick and Justine Hogan of Cambridge Stud. It was a big result for him too, because I was with him when he backed her. He was a very good judge.
He came from what feels like a vastly different era, the era of Mr. Jillings, and everybody was Mr. and that sort of thing. But when it was closer to home, it was Pow. Now, you're famous for your Powlisms. He's the man who started for you, the Pow.
Yeah, you've just got no idea what a great person he was. He was such a kind person. I remember about 35 years ago, he said to me, how are you going? I said, oh, I'm really battling, Jello. I said, interest rates are now 22%. And my horses aren't going that well, I'm battling a bit. The next day he sent me 10 horses to adjust, 4 to break in. He was just a wonderful human being, and today, you notice with Wild Night, Opie had the black armbands on. That was for my dear friend Colin Jillings.
Obviously, Mr. Jillings and Mrs. Jillings, Alison, had been off the public radar for a while, so some people wouldn't know that Mrs. Jillings actually passed away 6 or 9 months ago, so Colin and her are now back together.
Yes, that's dead right. Alison was a big part of his life. In those days, they'd have 4 or 5 apprentices, and they all lived in the home with them, and she'd have their clothes all washed on race day. She'd have a tie for each apprentice to wear, a jacket for them. She made them all have haircuts, and she made them all look the part. She was a massive part in the operation, and yeah, one of the great things, he was very competitive at everything he did, and he loved trout fishing. that was really his only hobby. And Peter Grieve, Ivan Grieve, and the late Herbie Dyke and I, we were in the trout fishing team together. And once it came when you could put the lines out, all Gillo wanted to do was win that damn tournament. And he concentrated until it was time to pull the lines in, and then it was time to play poker. And he was just a fantastic friend to have, and we won that trout fishing tournament 17 of 21 years. And it was because he was so determined that everything he did in life was win.
David, did he ever tell you who he thought was the best, whether that was Uncle Remus, or obviously McGinty was a personal favourite for many people, or in fact the Phantom Chance? Did you ever have that discussion with him?
Oh, I think the Phantom Chance, if you'd seen his face, I was sitting next to him when he won the Cox Plate. It's hard to get a horse as good as the Phantom Chance was. And the interesting story was, after the sales, he sent the horse to Tiaki out to adjust. And he said, I don't want to see this horse for 12 months. He's a slow maturing horse. So 6 months later, I rang him and I said, you won't believe this horse. He's developed that much since the sales. You've got to get him going now. I'm not saying he'll win a 2-year-old race, but he'll win an early 3-year-old race. And he took a bit of convincing, but when the horse arrived, he said, he said, this is a Derby horse. And he wasn't wrong. He won the Derby, and he just planned every day with the horse. He was a special, special trainer and a special human being.